Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wondered why some live performances just grab you unlike anything else, leaving you feeling connected and uplifted, while others fall a bit flat? Well, today we're diving into a fascinating study that explores exactly that, looking at how our feelings connect with the magic of live dance. The big question here is what makes a live performance so special, especially dance. We all know that feeling of being in a crowd, experiencing something together. Scientists have a term for that buzzy, unified feeling collective effervescence. This research wanted to see if this collective effervescence acts like a bridge, connecting our basic emotions to how much we enjoy a live dance show. Think of it this way, you are watching a dance, you feel something maybe happy, maybe a little sad, maybe just curious. This study asks, does that feeling combined with the feeling of being part of a group watching the dance actually make the experience more enjoyable? And how does this work for dance specifically compared to theater, which other studies have looked at? Live performances are a unique social experience. We're all there in the same space, sharing something. This isn't just about being with other people. It is about how that shared experience shapes what we feel and how we judge the performance. Concepts like collective effervescence, shared attention, and co-presence help us understand this heightened sense of connection that can pop up when we're together. Research shows that when we share attention on something emotionally interesting, it can actually boost our social bonds. And, surprisingly, the more we feel a sense of togetherness during a performance, the more we tend to enjoy it. Now, the researchers had already done some work on this in theater. They found that when people felt more emotional during a play, especially when they felt connected to each other and the actors, they enjoyed the play more. It was like emotion led to this group feeling, which then led to enjoyment. They used a special questionnaire to measure this collective effervescence, looking at feelings of connection and a sense of something sacred or special about the event. But dance is different from theater. It often doesn't have a clear story. It can be more abstract, more about feeling and interpretation. Previous research on contemporary dance showed that audiences can feel both engaged and confused. And that confusion isn't necessarily a bad thing, it can be part of the engagement, especially in dance where ambiguity is common. Another related study even looked at brain waves. They found that when audiences watched dance together, especially live, their brain activity started to sync up more. This brain synchrony was highest when performers interacted directly with the audience. So, the researchers here thought, let's see if these ideas about collective effervescence apply to contemporary dance. And if it works the same way as theater, they looked at two dance pieces. The first was called detective work. They wanted to see if the same pathway they found in theater where emotion leads to group feeling, which leads to enjoyment, also works for this dance. And importantly, they compared people watching it live versus people watching a recording. This study used data from people who watched detective work, either in a live performance or as a cinema screening. Detective work is a contemporary dance piece. It is like a detective story but through movement. The dancers explore ideas of searching and researching, using a mix of planned and improvised moves. It has quick changes and shifts in mood. Interestingly, the dancers sometimes interact with the audience, like making eye contact or breaking the fourth wall, which means they acknowledge the audience directly. This is important because it blurs the line between performers and viewers. They gathered information from quite a few people, but after filtering out incomplete data, they ended up with 65 people who watched it live and 56 people who watched it as a screening. So, how did they measure things? To understand emotions, they use something called the Self-Assessment Mannequin, or SAM. It is a simple way for people to rate how they feel on two scales. Valence, which is basically how positive or negative you feel, and arousal, which is how energized or calm you feel. They measured this before and after the performance to see how the dance changed their feelings. For enjoyment, they just asked one clear question: I enjoyed the performance. To measure that collective effervescence idea, they focused on connectedness. They asked people how connected they felt to the other audience members and how connected they felt to the performers. They used several questions for each of these. They used a powerful statistical tool called structural equation modeling, or SEM, to figure out how all these pieces fit together. They ran separate analyses for the live audience and the screened audience. First, they looked at how people's feelings changed. For those watching live, there wasn't a big change in how positive or energized they felt after the show compared to before. But for the screening group, people actually felt a bit less positive and less energized after watching. This is an interesting starting point. When they compared live viewers to screening viewers, the live audience generally reported higher levels of connectedness and enjoyment. The difference in enjoyment was statistically significant, meaning it was unlikely to be just a coincidence. While other differences were smaller or not significant, it hints that watching live might offer a richer experience for some aspect. Now, for the main event, the mediation analysis. This is where they test if one thing acts as a bridge between two others. They found that for detective work, it was the valence of the emotion, how positive people felt, that predicted enjoyment. This was true whether people watched live or on screen. This positivity indirectly led to enjoyment through connectedness. And here is a key finding. Connectedness to the performers was a much stronger bridge to enjoyment than connectedness to the other audience members in both live and screened versions. So, feeling connected to the dancers themselves was super important for enjoying the dance. Arousal or energy levels didn't seem to play a significant role in connecting emotions to enjoyment. This figure shows these relationships in both the live and screening conditions. You can see that valence affects enjoyment, but the effect is stronger when it goes through connectedness, and even stronger when that connectedness is specifically to the performers. Arousal, on the other hand, has very little impact. Next, they looked at a second dance piece, readings of what was never written. This one was described as having a ritual-like meditative atmosphere. The researchers wanted to see if the sacredness aspect of collective effervescence, which they didn't fully measure in the first study, played a bigger role here. For this study, they had 73 participants. They used similar measures for emotion and enjoyment. But this time, they used a more focused version of the collective effervescence questionnaire. They kept measures for connectedness and also included measures for sacredness, which taps into that feeling of a greater purpose or something special about the event. Again, they used structural equation modeling to see how emotions, collective effervescence, and enjoyment were related. Interestingly, for readings of what was never written, people's arousal levels also decreased after the performance, but their valence, or how positive they felt, stayed about the same. Participants reported moderate connectedness, but higher levels of sacredness and enjoyment. Here is where things get really interesting. In this study, it wasn't general connectedness that primarily drove enjoyment. Instead, it was sacredness that acted as the main bridge between emotions and enjoyment. Valence, or how positive people felt, influenced enjoyment, but mostly through this feeling of sacredness. Connectedness, surprisingly, didn't have a significant indirect effect on enjoyment in this study. This diagram really highlights the key finding of study 2. Valence influences enjoyment, but it is the path through sacredness that is significant and strong. The direct path from valence to enjoyment and the path through connectedness are much less important or not significant at all. So, what does it all mean? The researchers noticed a big difference between their previous theater studies and these dance studies. In theater arousal, that feeling of being energized or excited, regardless of whether it is positive or negative, was important. But in dance, it was valence, the positivity of the emotion, that mattered. They think this might be because contemporary dance, especially the types they studied, often doesn't rely on a strong narrative or high drama emotional swings like theater sometimes does. Instead, these dances perhaps create more reflective, or even dreamlike, states where a gentle, positive feeling is more conducive to enjoyment. The core idea that collective effervescence acts as a mediator, a bridge between emotion and enjoyment, seems to hold up for dance too. However, the type of collective effervescence that matters most can change. In readings of what was never written, the feeling of sacredness, that sense of something larger than oneself and deeply meaningful, was the most important factor. This fits with the choreographer's intention to create a ritualistic atmosphere. It suggests that when a performance evokes awe or a sense of the profound, even if it is confusing or ambiguous, people can find it deeply enjoyable. This feeling of being moved can be powerful even without full understanding. In detective work where they didn't measure sacredness, connectedness was the key mediator, and within connectedness, feeling connected to the performers was consistently more important than feeling connected to the other audience members, whether it was live or screened. This underlines how crucial the performer-audience connection is. This idea of performer-audience coupling is a big takeaway. When dancers break the fourth wall, make direct eye contact, or reduce the distance between themselves and the audience, it seems to significantly boost engagement and enjoyment. It makes the experience feel more shared and personal. They also saw hints that live performance might amplify these effects. While the core pathway of emotion to social connection to enjoyment was present in both live and screened versions, the live experience seemed to boost connectedness and enjoyment more. However, the effect of feeling connected to other audience members was much weaker in the screening, suggesting that physical co-presence truly makes a difference in how we feel connected to each other, beyond just watching the same thing. Now, like any study, this one has its limits. The sample sizes weren't huge, especially compared to their theater studies. This means that some findings, like the weaker role of audience connectedness in the screening, might be true, but they couldn't be detected with absolute certainty due to the smaller numbers. They also couldn't control for as many personal factors, like how much dance expertise people had, which might influence their enjoyment. And the way they measured collective effervescence wasn't exactly the same across all studies, making direct comparisons tricky. So, what is next? The researchers suggest we need more studies that measure both connectedness and sacredness in the same dance performance to really understand when each one becomes more important. They also think it would be amazing to measure these feelings in real time, perhaps by looking at things like heart rate synchrony between audience members or between audience and performers. Imagine feeling that collective buzz as it happens. It would also be cool to ask the performers themselves how they feel. Do they experience collective effervescence too? Is it a two-way street between performers and audience? In conclusion, this research suggests that enjoying contemporary dance isn't just about your own personal feelings, but also about how those feelings are shared and transformed within the social context of the performance. Collective effervescence, whether it is a sense of connectedness to performers or a feeling of sacredness about the event, acts as a crucial bridge. The specific flavor of this connection, connectedness versus sacredness, and who we feel connected to seems to depend on the type of dance and how it is presented. It really highlights live performance as a unique way we connect with each other and with art. And for those interested, the data and the code for this study are publicly available online, which is great for scientific transparency. It is important to remember that these findings are from audiences in the UK who likely have some interest in contemporary dance. So it might not apply to all types of performances or all cultural groups. The dances studied were also non-narrative, so different types of performances might yield different results. A big thank you to all the researchers who worked on this fascinating project, and no conflicts of interest to report, which is always good to know. This research was supported by the European Research Council and the French National Research Agency, so a nod to them for making this exploration possible. And yes, you can find the data and code at the provided link. What I find so exciting about this research is how it tells us that the magic of live performance isn't just in the artistry on stage, but in the shared experience it creates. It shows that being part of an audience, feeling that connection, whether it is to the dancers or to something bigger, actively shapes how much we enjoy what we're seeing. It is more than just watching, it is about participating in a collective emotional journey. So next time you are at a dance show, pay attention to those feelings of connection and wonder. They might be the secret sauce to your enjoyment. What are your thoughts on collective effervescence? Have you ever felt that intense sense of togetherness during a live show? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this deep dive into the psychology of performance, please give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the wonders of the human mind. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.